Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I'm your co-host, JP Jabaz from the Two-Man Power Trip. Of course, joining me is my co-host, the financial wrestling genius himself, Mr. Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, John, I'm doing well. A special guest to start out, one of the OGs of the Business of the Business podcast. It's been way too long. Sometimes they say tragedy or bad news brings people together. So, of course, in light of the passing of Joe Koff, we are bringing on one of the foremost writers and analysts of Ring of Honor, Stephen Jackson of the UK.
Oh wow, thank you. That's such a nice intro. Yeah, it's crazy. Like we were just saying, me and John off air, that it was a long time ago since I was last on the show. So episode was it episode 39? You said, which was a couple of years ago. So
Yeah.
it's amazing to be back on the show, and it's nice to be able to actually speak about or be able to speak about Joe as well, because I've never done this before for a podcast. Actually, share memories of somebody. So yeah, thank you. It's really nice to be invited on to speak about Joe.
So what did you think about the passing of Joe Koff? Obviously, the part of Sinclair Broadcasting was a huge part of why Ring of Honor was on the station. Obviously, they bought him out because of him. But when you look at it, he had a history in wrestling. So what was your thoughts on the passing of Joe?
I was really sad. I actually didn't know he was poorly or he was unwell actually. So it did actually surprise me that he passed away. And I mean, I think in terms of Ring of Honor's history, he for me as a fan, he was so pivotal in that he was able to keep Ring of Honor alive at a time when it was struggling in terms of finances and in terms of the direction, I think, of the company. And he brought he brought a lot of stability and a lot of optimism. And also he, like you said, had a history in wrestling, so he'd been involved in it for a long time and he was a lifelong fan. So although he wasn't, say, as loud a character or as eccentric a character, say like a Paul Heyman or Vince McMahon, he had a passion for it, and you could see that come through in his tenure as the chief executive Ring of Honor. So it was sad, but also, it's nice to be able to, like I said, share memories of his tenure as the chief executive of Ring of Honor as well.
What did you think? What would have happened to Ring of Honor without him? You know what I mean? Like they would have just obviously, I mean, they're still going today, technically speaking. AEW was able to buy him, but I don't know if they exist without Joe.
I don't believe so. I think Joe was the person who was the right. I mean, I know the conversation he spoke with Jim Cornette, I believe, and then Jim and him. Jim Cornette's his history in wrestling. They may have met. I don't know fully, but I know that Joe definitely had with Sinclair, because technically Sinclair bought the company, but it was him who, you know, um, persuaded Sinclair that this is the company which we should buy, and this is wrestling what we need on the network, Sinclair Broadcasting Network. I don't know really, and I think that's one of the interesting things is that although we saw years later, it would be 10 years later that Ring of Honor would finally, the original iteration of Ring of Honor would come not to be anymore. He thankfully allowed it to last for another 10 years. And with that, we saw it get a national TV deal. It, got the New Japan and CMLL relationships and brought in wrestlers, people who, like Cody and the Young Bucks. Again, he brought the Young Bucks back and things like that. He had a big impact on fans and the actual wrestling promotion itself. So yeah, it's interesting to think about it really and where it would have gone without him.
When you look at it too, what did that mean just to you at just that era? Did you really think it was one of the best? Did you think creatively they were great wrestling wise? Kind of where do you see that era of ROH?
I thought it's fantastic. I know a lot of Ring of Honor fans aren't as. See, the thing about Ring of Honor fans, like any wrestling fans, they kind of look at it through like rose tinted glasses. And I actually went through and looked at a lot of the earlier Ring of Honor shows, like during COVID and things like that, because some of the ones I'd forgotten about. And some of them, although the top of the card was very, you had guys like AJ Styles, Loki, Christopher Daniels, and the like. The lower card wasn't as good, and it was more for me it didn't do it, whereas with the Sinclair network relationship it took a couple of years to kind of pick up steam. So it's kind of like say around 2000 late 2012 2013 onwards, it kind of was a totally different promotion, and there was just so many great matches. I mean the production values improved. The actual commentary team. I mean, he brought together Nigel McGuinness and Kevin Kelly, who I think are one of the best commentary teams in a long time, if ever, for me. And as a fan, being able to see guys like AJ Styles return to the company after so long, and seeing guys like Jushin Thunder Liger come in, the rise of Adam Cole, Jay Briscoe winning the title as well, which again, obviously Jay passed last year. That was a huge moment for me, being such a long time Ring of Honor fan. And then, near the time of like COVID and things, when you got guys like Jonathan Gresham, Jay Lethal, Matt Taven, it was not necessarily, it was a different era of Ring of Honor, but it's one which I always think was great. I think it was a more rounded promotion, and then we had the Women of Honor coming in as well. So I felt it was a lot more rounded for me, and I enjoyed that. And an hour a week watching Ring of Honor was a blast. I could just watch it on my computer and I could just enjoy it. So he had a big impact on that as well. Bringing that weekly TV show of just great wrestling. So I appreciate that from him.
And think about it, Madison Square Garden, the home of the WWF forever and ever, able to sell out. Obviously, people will say, like ended up being a negative. They went with the wrong things creatively, but still selling out Madison Square Garden with New Japan also. But just amazing to be able to say that and it not being a WWE show.
Absolutely. I mean, that was huge news for me. Like, I remember when I was at the Wrestling Estate and I was writing about Ring of Honor, I kind of went through a phase when I had time of doing like a weekly Ring of Honor roundup. And when I heard that news, it was just mind blowing. And that, Ring of Honor are going to, sell out Madison Square Garden. And they did, and I mean, obviously with the problem was, foreshadowing what happened, where a lot of the Young Bucks and Cody left, and a lot of that with the elite and all that side of things. But still, I mean, it's a massive achievement to be able to sell out Madison Square Garden when it was the WWE's sort of home. And I think it was a great show. I know people say, oh well, didn't New Japan overshone Ring of Honor and things, but it was a joint production. And I will say as well that I think in terms of a promotion coming from where Ring of Honor had come from, again, without Joe and his contacts and probably his leverage in terms of getting that to come to be, he helped make that happen, and he helped reassure those people that we'd be able to do it. And yeah, I mean, it was fantastic. I think as well, creatively, it was sort of one of those things where a lot of people do say, it's just kind of going off the point slightly, but I will say creatively, a lot of people did say during that time of Ring of Honor that it lacked something, but I actually liked the fact that it sort of was all about the wrestling. I enjoyed the storylines themselves. I think there was quite a lot of diversity in the cards. I think that was one of the other things as well early on. It was very top heavy, so you didn't have anything lower down the cards, but there was some great feuds throughout the whole, shows, what were really good to watch as well. And again, he although he wasn't probably involved in the creative, he reassured people probably that they could do what they could do. Again, like with Madison Square Garden and things like that. So yeah, I thought it was great.
What do you think of today's ROH?
Interesting question, that. I think, it's interesting. I think one good thing is that, unless you're a diehard fan, like what Lavie was saying about me, and I came to Ring of Honor very early on, because over here in the UK, as I always say, we had the wrestling channel, so that had so many different promotions. I was able to see it, along with TNA, 01, Noah, like it was on the schedule, so I got to see it. A lot of wrestling fans didn't have exposure to Ring of Honor and probably didn't watch it because they didn't know about it. Like when I've spoken to people, I think now it's affiliated with AEW, it's good because the archive has been preserved and they've got the Honor Club and you can watch all that. My only concern with the current Ring of Honor is that it does feel like it's more of it was always seen as the promotion where it made people stars. Its impact in wrestling cannot be understated in terms of, guys like Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole, Nigel McGuinness. They all came from Ring of Honor and grew through it. Samoa Joe, AJ Styles. But where it's placed in the AEW sort of, fabric, it feels more now that it is more of that kind of developmental promotion for me. And it's not on a par. Because we need to remember as well, this is the other thing about the Sinclair relationship. In around 2015, 2016, Ring of Honor was actually number 2 in the US because Impact was actually, struggling at the time. So Ring of Honor actually overtook, in terms of buy rates and viewing figures and, actual sort of engagement in the product. So I like what they're doing in terms of the matches, and I like it, but I also, in terms of where it sits in the AEW, fabric, it just isn't where I would want it to be. I would rather it have its own. It feels too much like a sort of NXT, which I don't want it to feel like. In a way, it's an interesting one. I don't dislike it, but then again, it's not how I would envision it. Let's put it that way.
Lavie, hand it over to you.
Yeah, Stephen, I really enjoyed your feedback on the current Ring of Honor. I got in one of those trouble when I said maybe it's time to close up shop so they can concentrate on AEW, and then had to hide the comments for a while. But there's always something cooking. Like even as we record this, suddenly it's breaking Chris Jericho. I mean, we know Chris Jericho's the champion, but that he's the champion to make it more appealing to get a TV deal. Has there ever been like a time where Ring of Honor is not chasing that elusive TV deal?
Well, they did get was it Destination America, I believe, and like I was saying, about 2015, which Impact had. So I think they were kind of there, but then I don't know what happened. And again, one of those good questions we could have asked Joe Koff, maybe, I don't know. I mean, they got HDNet as well, but then again, HDNet wasn't what they again. It didn't really work. I think one of the struggles with Ring of Honor is that because it was so ingrained in the indie fabric as when it was formed, going to a TV deal is kind of, you've got to know how to put it on TV. And I think they did do that during the Sinclair era, but I also think for those diehard fans, a lot of them anyway, not myself, they struggle with that because it takes away that kind of gritty indie, sort of more less polished style of wrestling, so I think they always will sort of chase it to a degree, but it is there. I think it's more just people's acceptance of it, maybe, as well. It's an interesting question, actually. Yeah.
So swinging around the world, another one of the markets that you certainly spent a lot of time on, and correct me with my pronunciation, I'm still working on it after a number of years, Puroresu, as Puroresu, as the a former editor of I'm going to try to avoid saying the name again, of the monthly publication. What do you think? From what I gather, even in Japan right now, the state of that business isn't necessarily what it was.
Yeah, I am. It's interesting. You actually they marry very well together, these two topics, because what I love about the like what John was saying earlier about with Joe and memories of Joe. One thing what I'm always very grateful for with Joe Koff, and I told him this as well, like on LinkedIn, and we did have interactions on LinkedIn, brief ones, but we did send messages, and he was always complimentary of the articles. But he was able to bring in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and Ring of Honor had always had a relationship with Japanese and international promotions. But what he did was way before we had Forbidden Door with AEW, way before we had all the Impact and WWE relationship. It was Ring of Honor who brought in New Japan, and when they first announced the War of the Worlds and the Global Wars shows in 2014, so 10 years ago now, it was so exciting because being able to see these guys like Hiroshi Tanahashi, Kazuchika Okada, Shinsuke Nakamura, Tetsuya Naito going over to America was so exciting, and it was just on fire at the time. It was Puroresu. It was just New Japan specifically. It was just unstoppable. The wrestling was absolutely off the charts. Like it still is. It's still my favorite period of Japanese pro wrestling. Is that 2012 to 2017 era. I just thought it was fantastic in New Japan. I think what's happened is that era, a bit like what happened in Ring of Honor, again, the AEW scenario where, Kenny Omega won the title from Kazuchika Okada, people crying in the audience, huge moment. And then he lost the title 6 months later, and it was kind of like this passing of the torch kind of then went the opposite way. And I feel, again, like you were saying about Ring of Honor chasing a TV deal, I think that New Japan especially has been chasing that level of engagement since. They've had moments. I mean, they've had guys like Jay White come in, and they've had Will Ospreay, and just recently Zack Sabre Jr., another fellow Brit. Really excited that he won the title. But I feel that it's been really struggling to build those stars for that next generation. And people are getting older. We've seen that Hiroshi Tanahashi recently announced his retirement. From the industry next year at the Tokyo Dome. Which again, like Keiji Muto, will be a huge moment in Japanese wrestling history. So I think that from more of a sort of more of the like general fans, there's a struggle. But if you go a bit deeper, like I enjoy, you've got places like All Japan Pro Wrestling where it's a fantastic promotion. It's digestible, great shows, very much like Ring of Honor. Easy to watch, great wrestling. Noah bringing in people like the WWE talent. We saw AJ Styles come in, and recently we're going to see again Shinsuke Nakamura. DDT, which is just eccentric and beyond it, and Joshi promotions. Although Joshi is not my specialty, Joshi with sort of like Marigold and stuff, and TJPW. So there's outside of the New Japan sort of bubble. If you go a bit deeper, you'll find something what appeals. But I do think that the industry has definitely struggled post sort of elite period, I would say. Just trying to find that next level, trying to make those new stars. I think that's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm a huge Zack Sabre Jr. fan. Like, originally he appealed to me like kind of in an odd way, meaning that like he didn't look like everyone else. At that, I know he's built out like his body more later, but at that time his arms were kind of like mine. And he was like, it doesn't matter. Like, like he was an amazing wrestler, and it wasn't about that. And that was unique and cool to me. Like, and off the charts charisma and everything like that, as someone that's not even into most modern wrestling at this time. I want to talk a little bit more about you. I think originally when you came on the show, it was really focused on this publication, which was amazing. Like anything pro wrestling in print, like when I get my PWI in the mail, I'm just like, thank you God, this still exists, even though like I don't even read it that much. I'm just like, I'm going to support it. They actually just had their like I'm a circulation nerd, so like I get excited when the issue comes. Like how many? So their numbers are just under 10,000 for print publication. We don't know digital because they don't have to reveal that publicly. But sort of, can you take us through that journey, having been an editor and later a freelancer? And what are your thoughts on it in retrospect?
Yeah, it's one of those, a bit like our sort of relationship. Really, it just began through sort of social media. So being a fan. See, the interesting thing is, like, people sort of one guy I used to work with called me an encyclopedia of wrestling, which was a great compliment. But I just see myself as a fan at the end of the day. We all are fans of different things, whether it be music or films. I mean, I love those things as well, but certain things we gravitate towards, and wrestling was one of those things where I just wanted to soak it up like a sponge. And when I found out there was wrestling from around the world, this was years ago, then obviously again and with the access to the internet, you just see all these different promotions. So it was just through a mutual relationship through Twitter that Tom at the time asked me to become the social media sort of manager for Monthly Puroresu, and sort of lead the Twitter account and then, write some articles. So I'd always wanted to write about, I'd written for the Wrestling Estate, but it was exciting because it was a publication and I could actually hold it and see it. And then, from a writing perspective, that's kind of like, the one thing you want to have, whether it be a novel or something, or want to hold it and feel it. So that was kind of where it started. And then in terms of sort of like the evolution, it was more sort of, because I grew in terms of my sort of writing ability and also, through that editing ability, and you kind of work so quickly. That's the thing, but because when you're producing something independently, similar to this podcast, you have to do it in your own time and you have to have a passion for it. And that's what drove it, I think. And, we also then were able to, through that relationship, get new writers on board, new levels of expertise. We were able to make, relationships with particular promotions and wrestlers. So it was all a very organic operation. I think that was the thing what I took from it, is that it was all very organic, and it helped me to understand as well that, you know, when you have got a passion for something, in this case, as we're talking about now, like wrestling or something, there's an audience there who want to read it and want to digest it. You know, we were able to send the publication out to not just, you know, the United States, but we're able to send it out to here in the UK, to New Zealand, Australia, Japan, you know, Portugal. It was insane, you know, like this magazine, what's produced by these people, you know, and it just, that's what's the most exciting thing, I think, is where you have a little bit of something you've created in somebody's house, like halfway across the world. And I think that's the thing what I always take from it, is that, you know, and I think in terms of work, it's not necessarily the best work, because we're all, as a writer, you're critical. It wouldn't say it's my best work, but it's the work I'm most proud of from a creative and a outreach standpoint. You know, being able to do that and being able to bring that to so many people with Tom and the team, and guide people as well in terms of editing and stuff like that, was a fantastic project to be part of, especially about something like Japanese wrestling, which a lot of people, again, not everyone knew about particular promotions. So it was great being able to share that with other people as well.
Now, you know, as Tom, of course, moved on to other things, like how excited and proud were you to like learn that he's now with Bushiroad and New Japan? Is that like inspirational?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's fantastic. He, you know, has worked so hard to get to where he is and worked to get to Japan. He's achieved his dream, and I am really proud for him. We still message, you know, because of work commitments, we don't speak just as frequently. But he did come to see me a couple of years ago for my birthday, which was great. You know, so we have met, and I am hoping to go back out there at some point. I am hoping to go out to Japan for the first time and meet him and see him and his fiance. And it's just great that, you know, again, because this is one of the other things about wrestling is, it's very hard when we are the outsiders, in a sense, and we're not actually in the country, to be commentating on something which is happening halfway across the world, but for it to gravitate with those people, and people appreciate it in Japan and in Puroresu, the wrestlers themselves as well. So it's very humbling and nice to know that that's the case. Similar to with Joe Koff, where, you know, I mean, when we used to post out about articles about Ring of Honor and Joe would actually comment on them, that was for me, you know, the sort of best thing in the world, is that, you know, the person who runs this company actually appreciates the work we're doing, and, you know, like similar with the fans, they appreciate what we're doing, you know, over in Japan. So yeah, it's great to know that he's, you know, over there and he's making a massive impression in the you know, the Bushiroad network. It's great.
So while we have the opportunity, Stephen, sometimes like from the US perspective, and you hear about like MLW or TNA getting a new deal, a renewed deal. In the UK, it sort of all sounds the same, right? But then when I ask my contacts, they're like, no, that's, you know, something like, oh, that's a great opportunity for them. Or no, that's like, whatever, behind a paywall, no one sees it, whatever it may be, but it all sounds good, right?
Yeah.
So can you, like, I know this is a big ask, but like in terms of media, can you sort of give us a lay of the land, both for international promotions from the US and certainly New Japan, and like what's the scene like in the UK in terms of any media distribution there?
Yeah, so it's interesting that, you know, now New Japan recently got a deal with a network in the UK. I just can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, which was exciting. I think, again, this is sort of the thing with the way the world has changed in terms of how things are streamed now so much, and the internet is such a tool, not just outside of wrestling as well, you know, so people have the internet, and watching things, you know, on the go and stuff like that has been the way people digest the majority of TV and content. I think one thing so AEW, for example, is on ITV over here in the UK, so it's on ITV4, so it has got a network where it appears on. But I know that a majority of people will probably view AEW probably on Triller TV, I expect. And then other promotions did have deals, like, you know, like, I don't know exactly if Impact still have a deal or not with Challenge, I believe it was at the time. Oh, sorry, Channel 5, I believe, and then their sister channels. I I think one of the big difficulties with wrestling is that WWE is currently on TNT Sports, so they have got a deal. And I think that's one of the things where I think it's probably a bit like what happened in the 90s with sort of the Monday Night Wars in a sense. I think a lot of TV executives struggle to see the benefit of having wrestling on the channel because they want it to be exactly like WWE, because that's what people expect the majority of wrestling to be, when WWE is the apex of wrestling and that's not the whole scope of the wrestling industry. So it would be better if certain channels would give opportunities for especially UK promotions, post-COVID, to be able to get deals. I mean, that's one of the things where I think for a lot of fans, especially, with sort of here in the UK, we've just recently had the budget come out, so cost of living crisis, like you're saying, paywalls and the like. If there was an opportunity for promotions like RPW or Progress to appear on some kind of TV channel which was a lot more accessible and not having to pay for it, then it would be a lot better, I think. But I think that's probably one of the difficulties, is a lot of wrestling, non-wrestling executives who try and understand wrestling think, oh, well, WWE, it doesn't look like that. This doesn't look like WWE. And it's like, well, no, it's not. It's different. I mean, we can see as well, like, I mean, in terms of, I think that's one thing as well to say about the industry over here is, you look at, since WWE became part of Endeavor and they've become part of the UFC, they've merged. Like you see you've seen AEW with All In London, you've seen Clash at the Castle, even in France, and Bash at Berlin, there's an appetite there still from European fans to see wrestling and see it not just in person but also on TV and stuff. So yeah, I think it's still a long way to go. But I do think from seeing those things that there's definitely an appetite for it to change. Absolutely.
So, Stephen, I'd love to learn about like your future, what's next, especially related to pro wrestling. As I look at your LinkedIn here, I see Wrestling Estate, November 2023, because that basically turned over to new ownership. We talked about the publication, which turned over to new ownership. And I see that you were doing a podcast that was through September 2024. So are you the hottest free agent unsigned in the world of pro wrestling media?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's interesting about the podcast situation because BBG Wrestling, what held the podcast, they seem to have disappeared. I've spoken to Chris, who was the sort of manager of it, but again, due to work commitments, I just haven't heard from him. I was actually asked to overtake the Wrestling Estate website and by the new owner, but unfortunately, my only concern is due to work commitments and just outside commitments. It's such a big job, a project. I'm leading the website in a full-time role as it is, let alone, on the side. So I would much rather contribute to content and advise on content as opposed to actually lead it, because I want to do it justice. So yeah, I mean, like in terms of wrestling at the moment, I think more than anything, actually, these past sort of, I don't know, probably this past year, I've just been enjoying it again as a fan, really. I think I've just been kind of re-engaging with it with a different lens, I mean, I think that's one of the things is we're all fans of wrestling, but sometimes we can be a bit analytical of wrestling, but I've actually kind of taken a step back and got back into that fandom sort of aspect of it. Especially with things like I recently tweeted out about the WWE Vault YouTube channel, what recently came to be, and being able to see a lot of that hidden content and stuff from the network and things has been great to be able to see that again online, and certain shows what they're putting up and stuff. But yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to either speak to me about writing articles or wants to know about, I mean, again, like with Ring of Honor or Japanese related or just like guest spots, then I'm totally open to it with opportunity commitments permitting. It's again just one of those things where things just sometimes end organically again, and then things just come about. So still watching it, still loving it. I've been really, in terms of fandom, I've actually been really enjoying WWE, believe it or not. I think they've had some, again, maybe post Vince McMahon leaving the company and just the way they've gone, I think they've been great, and like WrestleMania was awesome. I've been watching a lot of All Japan, like I said, because it's easy to watch. So I still am watching Japanese pro wrestling. It's just, again, keeping up with it. It's like a full-time job as well as working. But yeah, so I am technically a free agent, believe it or not.
Great. Let me turn it over to John.
Where could everybody find you, social media wise?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as Lavie said, I'm on LinkedIn. So if you just search for me, Stephen Jackson on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find me there. And then I'm also on Twitter. So Twitter/X. So at SteeJ215. So yeah, still there, still tweeting when I get chance, or posting, whatever we call it, X, and sharing, mainly just sharing insights, like I said, just and different things, just about wrestling and reposting things. And if anyone wants to connect and message me and just know more about, generally wrestling, but also just, wants to, like I said, maybe have an interview or a podcast, then I'm more than happy to, speak to people. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Stephen, thank you so much. I appreciate all the time today.
No, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for letting me share memories of Joe, and being able to talk about wrestling as a whole. It's always a blast being on the show. So it's been too long, like I said. So yeah,
Yeah,
I've
we got to
really
bring it back
enjoyed it.
quicker. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm a free agent now, so you might be able to. I don't know.
Great.
No,
Thanks
really
so much. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Stephen. Yep.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Lavie, let's talk a little bit about WWE ID. What's going on with that?
Yeah, no, that caught me by surprise this week. There's always something going on in wrestling, and then we're starting to learn through really Brandon's efforts that there are people signed already to this. What does it mean? I don't know, but it's really fascinating from WWE perspective. I think it's a smart win. Like, there has to be different ways of developing talent, and not all of it necessarily goes through the performance center and NXT initially. There are some talents that got some training, maybe they could get better training, and like there's different ways and places that you could send them. So establishing relationships with partners and trust seems like a good idea. From all of the sites that were named, most of them have an obvious forward-facing relationship to WWE, from Booker T to Cody Rhodes to Seth Rollins Center to Knox Pro. I'm not as familiar with Elite Pro out of Concord, but obviously there's some existing relationship already there to trust them to kick it off. I guess it's sort of like, what does this mean? Like, when you sign talent to such an agreement, is the main point to keep them away from AEW? Is it to allow them not to have to work, double shifts at the Amazon warehouse or at UPS so that they could concentrate on a wrestling career? Is it to send them to some wrestling places and avoid, death matches with light bulbs so that they're not scarred, or just even not sign toy deals so that when their first deal is a WWE deal, that it's the first time there's been a master license for that. It also came out, of course, that Gabe Sapolsky is overseeing this. It's interesting. He's had a couple times, or at least once I remember, I feel like a couple, where he's like, okay, goodbye, pro wrestling world. It's been nice knowing you. And then he's back. And, obviously he's formed a good relationship with Triple H. This is probably, in terms of what I know about Gabe from like a public perspective, certainly, like this is probably a good use of his talents. Sometimes other talents have talked about his reputation. We see like some of those seminars he would charge for. I think Effie, has commented on such before. So a little bit of potential shadiness in the past that people have referred to, but certainly as a talent evaluator, especially for like that more ushering in the more indie style, that's really influenced, major pro wrestling since the Ring of Honor days. He certainly has an eye for talent. So I don't think there's too many other people that could have such an influence. What did you take about the news, John?
Pretty shocked by it. That definitely threw me for a loop. But if you look at it, the Booker T school, the Cody school, it does make sense. You kind of put everybody on that umbrella and don't let anybody go to AEW. You know what I mean? Always keep them thinking WWE, indie scene, WWE. So pretty smart, pretty savvy by Triple H.
Yeah, the question, and actually I was going to talk about it as a topic this week, so it was like well aligned, was like getting reps in promotions where there's a decent amount of fans and also engaged fans. So that's the difficult thing, because the coconut loop for NXT isn't meant to draw much, and it doesn't draw much, right? There's the specials, but you can only have so much talent on those. There's no more house shows, basically, so you can have a couple dark matches before a WWE show, but talent has to be ready to a certain degree, even at that level. Like, we know, going back years, like that was some of the most fun shows to go to, like where you could tell, like Brock Lesnar and John Cena and Randy Orton and Rico. I know it sounds funny to add him in this mix, but like at the time, like those talents were ready. Shelton Benjamin and so on. It was a lot of fun, but you don't have that now. So I was really thinking about this, and certainly they have the relationship with GCW. So, they're contracted, as came out in an article we'll talk about later, for 75 shows a year through Triller. The fans are certainly passionate. Some of those shows draw more than others. I would keep talent off shows where, there's death matches or anything like that. Even if they're not doing death matches, you just want to be careful about the blood and the people getting nicked, and as you can imagine. But they're building out their relationship with TNA, so do you start sending talents to TNA regularly to get more reps there? With the NWA and MLW and so on, there's only so many of those shows to go around. I know, John, this is crazy, and like, if we were like they're going to do it, it has to be a gigantic degree. But if WWE keeps like moving away from AEW, like in terms of like, right before, I used to refer to it as like 1 and 1A, because it looked like AEW was ascending and WWE was struggling a little bit. Not that they were going to overtake them, but if AEW is enough in the rearview mirror, like, isn't it to everyone's benefit to maybe send like some talents there to get reps? I know we've joked about, and the reality of like the people, how many people are in attendance, but you have at least 1,500 to, if it's a non-pay-per-view, like 3, 4, 5,000. People could get reps that way. I don't know. Like it might be a win-win. I know that sounds crazy.
Yep, definitely. Now, speaking of WB and what they're doing, I mean, obviously they have a great relationship with TNA. How has that relationship helped TNA? How are they doing? How did Bound for Glory do?
It certainly helped TNA, being on the NXT and just giving them more of a spotlight, and Joe Henry and all of that. But I think TNA, it was like sort of like a spark or like maybe accelerant. But I think TNA has been on the way up for the last year. And with the show recently in Michigan, I was like, did they cut off like part of the venue and so on? I'm not sure in the Observer what they reported this week as the attendance being, but our friend Josh Olson of Slam and Working Stiff on X, he wrote in an article on Slam, I noticed a sign on the wall in terms of maximum occupancy, which I've of course could vary show to show, 3,231. And truth be told, it felt every bit like there was over 3,000 people in attendance. And that looked like that to me. So TNA really can draw for their major shows now. And they've been able to do so consistently, whatever it is, every 6 weeks or 2 months and so on. As they return to some venues where they've had success, like San Antonio, that'll be interesting to see how they continue to do. But in January, they'll be in Garland, Texas, Curtis Colwell Center. Obviously a popular venue for AEW. New Japan has run and so on. It's a big venue relatively, about maximum 8,000. Obviously, they could cut it down to 2 if they want, or whatever's needed, but they have some room to work with. They're returning to San Antonio for a live show. So we had kept hearing about, TNA not wanting to spend money, and maybe that was a reason why Scott D'Amore left and so on. But look, they're paying for a live show here. Oh, by the way, apologies. In light of everything, really, the first thing that we should be talking about with TNA or even in the news in general is Chris Bay. Right? Hopefully, I'm getting that name correct.
Yeah.
Very serious injury. We don't know anything about it. I don't want to speculate on it, but he was injured in the ring. He had immediate neck surgery, and now he's recovering, and everyone that knows him and beyond is raising money for him. So one can, in their own minds, draw speculation, as to what he's going through right now, but just want to send good vibes there. But that was the taping the day after the big show. So everything is positive, from a business perspective, or certainly momentum, but obviously in light of all this. From a less important perspective, but a business perspective, do you think the opportunity was lost by not putting the belt on Joe Henry, or this is like sort of building momentum to something? I kind of think about it like Lex Luger not winning the belt at SummerSlam. Like eventually, like you're going to run out of momentum.
Exactly what I thought. I was honestly was like shocked. Not that I'm like getting into the booking of what you should and shouldn't do, but I was shocked. Like, wow, you got to capitalize on the momentum when he's hot. They completely cooled him off, in my view.
Yeah, now people are like, well, maybe Genesis, and that's a bigger venue, and so on. Now, the switch from Jordan Grace to Masha, I think, very much a positive, meaning that in what they needed to do. Meaning Jordan Grace is one of the best performers in the world now, as in my limited watching of wrestling. She's probably going somewhere else, right? Like either WWE or really whatever she wants to do.
She
But
was on
Masha,
NXT this week. She was on NXT.
yeah, on NXT, so they continue to promote her. I don't know if she can, right, like with the contract, if there's some allowance or plan like for the next step yet, but obviously she has those relationships, but she can do a number of things, but obviously that seems like the next step. But Masha is one of my favorites, and a great next step, in that regard. Just in terms of this Detroit weekend, Joe Henry and the Hardys were front courtside, I guess you'd say, for the Detroit Pistons. So that was a PR win in advance of the show. There's some sort of deal with Blacksmith Apparel that's been announced. So that's a nice plus in terms of revenue. So upcoming, some North Carolina stops: Fayetteville, November 8th and 9th, Winston-Salem, November 29th, Atlanta, December 13th and 14th, January 19th, they call it Texas, right? Garland, same metro area from what I understand. And then San Antonio. A double shot TV taping might be pushing it a little bit. It doesn't, I don't know if TNA opened up all the purse strings to like have to move a production to a whole nother place. I don't think they would anticipate much audience for the second show, but that's what it is. But it'll be interesting to see how much that live audience is pushed. And we haven't seen any Nielsen numbers from Access TV for quite a while.
What's going on with Triller? You mentioned it before. Seems like there's always something going on with Triller.
So, although I neglected to put it in my notes, one of the things that I noticed sort of thematically for listeners of our show, Violent J said that, their streaming show, the Halloween night show, or maybe he was referring to something else, but that's what I gathered, was going to be on a different platform. And then, like, he said that they had conversations with Triller, and they were kind of like, well, I don't know if you should do this, kind of like be like negative about coming there because of some payment related concerns, and then suddenly they're on Triller. So that was interesting. Obviously, Triller's a public company now. I'm like, I haven't invested enough money to like be concerned necessarily while the stock like jumps up and down every day. For some days, I'm like, oh man, I lost 50%. That for the next day, I could cash out and earn 25%, but they're solidifying a little bit, especially post-merger, but there seems to be an emphasis, and smartly, on focusing on promotions that can draw viewers and draw signups to Triller Plus. That seems like a smart name of the game. So right, there was like some sort of progression with New Japan where like pay-per-views would first air on New Japan World and then later migrate to Triller and then maybe Access cut up and so on. But it seems like now that, especially for the US shows, that they're premiering on Triller maybe concurrently with New Japan World or exclusively first. I'm not sure, but that's a new deal. Smartly, like Defy has really built out, they have this service that they built out with Progress, but now they've signed a deal concurrently with Triller Plus where they're going to air a number of their shows on the network too. And jumping ahead and referring again to the GCW notes that we found out that there's a deal for 75 shows a year, which basically when I did some quick and dirty math on Cage Match, it looks like it's exactly that amount of shows that Brett and the team are doing in 2024.
Very good. Nice. Now, as far as New Japan Pro Wrestling is concerned, what's the latest with New Japan Pro Wrestling?
So just looking at Lowell quickly, which has been really quiet in terms of anyone talking about it. And as we're recording this, it's only a week away and obviously much closer when people hear this. There could be other tickets moved other places. Some people buy on price, but when you look at the first and second row around the ring, of course, there's a fair amount of tickets left. Some in the first, certainly a lot in the second. So even keying down to just a small amount of shows a year in the US that are like semi-important, semi-major, they don't seem to be able to draw anymore. Now, speaking of trouble with drawing, AEW Tix, smartly, both promotions are doing this sort of like co-promotion. They're like, hey, we're both in New England around the same time, so let's like promote it together. So Dynamite November 6th, Manchester, Providence November 7th, and Lowell November 8th. 30% off all tickets by using a code AEW NJPW. Back in the day when AEW was cooking and New Japan's live events here in the US were showing some strain, but pretty strong, probably showing some strain partly because of the rise of AEW, that I was thinking like, while AEW isn't running house shows, that they'd have the capacity maybe to be the US promoter of note for New Japan, but nothing like that ever happened. I'm just speculating. I don't know if anything like that was ever discussed, but obviously they have a strong relationship.
So you were talking about GCW before. What's going on with them? What's the latest? Because obviously they've got more news than maybe just running 75 shows. They got a lot going on.
Yeah, so in my culture, we call it like a yenta, meaning someone that trades in rumors. So I don't want to be too much of a yenta if anyone's ever seen like Fiddler on the Roof. But a lot of like rumors and speculation and controversy this week, which tends to come up every once in a while. We'll get Brett back on here as soon as our schedules align. We're both in conversation about that. But Nick Gage did an interview that I did not watch. Brett's opinion of it in tweeting seemed like that they're really pressing Nick for something juicy. But Nick did share that he's stepping away from GCW for now. It came out later that it was a 2-year contract that he had with GCW for whatever specifics that meant. But Brett had been hinting, and I'm assuming this is like correlated, that promoters were reaching out to Nick, while he was unavailable, which one could have speculated, but later it came out that he was in rehab and like people were offering him money. So I don't know if it's like, if Nick just wants a better opportunity for himself, to make more money, or maybe there's concern that, is he in the right physical condition, right state of mind, and so on. But the window is closing for him to make money. So obviously no one can belabor him for that or his career, but just things floating around about that. Less controversial. And John, I don't know if you've watched her perform, but like Sawyer Wreck, to me, from the limited amount I saw her, she like was just so different and dynamic that I was like, she's going to be a superstar. And she said, at least for now, sometimes we know things change for people, that she's stepping away from the business. So I think it's not like an impactful loss for GCW because she wasn't like in the position yet to like draw, quote unquote, draw money. Although she won like a deathmatch tournament or two for them at least, but like she was definitely an up and comer. Had you ever seen her?
No, not familiar with her at all. No.
Okay, so we'll both have to jump on the YouTube later
Yes.
for some highlights. But 2025 Collective, the Pearl Theater at the Palms Casino Resort in Vegas, 3 full days for the Collective. So that's something because was last year Philly? Time flies, John. Last year was Philly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they were in a catering hall, and sometimes that makes the most sense. But here, this is a pretty prestigious venue, I think, on how you set it up. I mean, it's fixed seating, but depending on if you use curtaining or you use the whole venue, I think it could be up to 2,500 people. So multiple shows a day, 3 days a week. That could be interesting. So that'll be interesting to see. In terms of talking about bringing in talent, Zachary Wentz has committed to a number of shows. Obviously, he's been ascending in TNA. I wasn't following it so much. Hopefully, I'm not mixing up the right talent. He was in WWE, and then there was some controversy, and then he was gone, right? So hopefully that's what I'm referring to. So now he's really like back on the radar again, and seemed to being a key talent in a number of these like challenger brands. One of the success stories of GCW right now is this mall show, the American Dreams Mall. Like they were one ticket away from selling the thing out, and then they added another row, and then I saw that those seats were almost gone. So I'm really curious, how many people like would be officially paying, to see this show. But some of the other shows, look kind of like a struggle right now. Like to go all the way out to Hawaii and maybe only be like 3 rows deep. That seems pretty expensive. I don't know how they did Halloween night. Kentucky, November 14th, they'll probably be fine. Sauget, Illinois looked like it was struggling November 15th. What does the Nick Gage Invitational really mean besides name only? But it looked like that was pretty good, like in terms of ticket sales. The death matches tend to draw. The blood sport is something different. Brooklyn, November 29th. Looked like it wasn't there yet. That'll probably do well. It's interesting to be back in Chicago on January 12th. Last time they didn't do so well. More newer announced, so I'm not going to evaluate ticket sales, but Tampa and Atlanta, double shot in December 13th and 14th, Phoenix and LA. I think LA was not sold out last time, but it looked like it drew really well. We'll have to get more clarity on that. December 28th in Seattle, back to Brett's original hometown, Rochester, on January 10th. They did really well there, the first 2 shows. And then, of course, the Hammerstein show on January 19th, where, again, like I feel like to sell it out, this time they're going to need like a good draw for the main event.
No doubt about it. How about AAA? This is the most interesting thing to me is our, of course, former guest, Dorian Roldan, but JBL.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's like if it's a business story. It seems like it would work. Like, I don't know if JBL was like inspired by Brian Pillman or what, but it's not clear like what the hell he's doing. Like, what is he doing, John? Like TNA, he's there. He messed up the main event. Now he's gonna take AAA worldwide, and they're announcing that he's like a part owner, but it's probably a storyline. I don't know. I'm curious, but it hasn't really seemed to have gone far, except in like JBL's mind.
It's interesting though. I'm intrigued. I want to see what's going to happen here. He wants to help Dorian because Dorian's doing that storyline where he's taking over AAA. It's in his family lineage. He's going to be so JBL is helping him. So obviously, there's a lot of heel stuff going on here with JBL in Mexico.
Yeah, you know where this is ending up, right? JBL versus El Patron in that WrestleMania. Was that a WrestleMania match? I might be mixing that up with something, but like that WWE mid or early 210s time or late 00s time.
Yeah, no, they didn't, but obviously it could be leading to them doing that. Speaking of leading to something interesting and talking about somebody taking over, Eric Bischoff, MLW, what the hell's going on with this?
Yeah, I don't know, and like, I think if he's actually there,
Yeah,
it'll
he'll be
be.
at the show.
Oh, he'll be there because they've done stuff like cheesy a little bit before, where they're like Don King, and they're like, it's like a Zoom. I'm on my phone today, so who am I to judge? But it was a Zoom thing where he like gave his blessing to something. But if he's there, then that's something interesting. My mind keeps going back to like week 2 or 3 of like TNA. On Monday nights, and he was in the ring playing his guitar, and I'm like, oh, they're screwed. Like, it's over. He's given up on them. So that'd be really funny if there's an inside joke where he starts out the show like sitting on a stool with his guitar.
Hey, I would love it. Anything Bischoff, I'm in. I'm all in for it. And finally, tell us about Billy Corgan's NWA.
So a nice little write-up by Tim Ronka in Tampa, just covering that their home base here is again being established as in Tampa. Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins brings historic wrestling promotion home to Tampa. Okay, the NWA now regularly films its television show NWA Power at Tampa's PBS station WEDU. There's a full circle moment for professional wrestling in Tampa. The NWA was once a dominant promotion. Okay. 4 decades later, Corgan tells Spectrum News that they're back home. We love coming to Tampa. They treat us so well here at WEDU. It has a great, rich history, so we're honored to be here, and the town treats us right. Corgan says he also has a personal connection to Tampa. He used to live here. He's been rebuilding the NWA's following since he purchased the company in 2017. When I took over, the NWA was kind of in the dust. People thought its best days were behind it. We've built it back up where there's now national and international interest. And it also mentions sometimes, you don't know like how big are these studios. Corgan says the TV studio setting is a throwback to the old wrestling days. It gives fans a unique experience compared to a big arena show. We have about 200 people in the studio. It's very intimate. Plus, people get to see how we make our show behind the scenes.
Nice. Very cool for Billy. I want to see how that turns out. Oh, good luck to the NWA. But let's head towards the plugs and wrap this bad boy up. Lavie, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. How about you?
Yeah, let's get to 100 members of the group on LinkedIn,
Yep.
The Business of the Business. We're at 99. So if you're listening now, smash that request button. Follow me on X, Laviemarg, LAVIEMARG. And perhaps by the time you're listening to this or next time when we record, hopefully it's all settled with no problems one way or another to see if we're living in another TrumpMania era.
Good point. Very, very good point. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. See you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.